This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today I have some unique topics here that I don't think we've discussed yet on the show. Those are misinformation, disinformation, and the truth. For that, I have Gregory Carpenter here. He is the co-owner of CW Pensecc. A little bit on Greg and his background. He had a 27-year military career where he served in several capacities across the infantry, logistics, medical service, and military intelligence branches. His previous positions include senior combat developer for Army Cyber Command, a span of several years at the National Security Agency and Central Security Service as a detailed military officer, and action officer in the Information Warfare Support Center. And here's a long one for you: Chief of Space Operations and Functional Team Lead for Electronic Warfare in the Combined Military Planning and Access Strategies Office. I got to ask, Greg, who came up with that super long title?
It's actually a hybrid title because there was a couple of actions going on that my office in the National Security Agency needed to consolidate, and that was cyber exploitation and electronic warfare exploitation.
Okay.
Exploitation, pardon me.
Very good.
So they couldn't reconcile the two different actions, and a lot of the tools that they used came out of the same tool bag. And they said, okay, well, since you have background in electronic warfare, electronic protection, electronic attack, and cyber, well, you're going to be the guy that takes and manages this portfolio. So my job was to make sure that all of the tools that were there, that were going to be used for specific actions, actually integrated and formed a coordinated mesh of support for combat troops engaged with adversaries.
Okay. Well, man, every time I talk to somebody that's had experience in the government, they always come in with just crazy titles or acronyms. So I always like to kind of get a background on that. Well, right off the bat, we're going to talk a little bit about you because I'm really curious. And I guess maybe after the audience hears this episode, they also might be curious. But how do you get into this space? So, how do you find yourself in the electronic warfare, talking about signals and different things? How might somebody actually go about pursuing a career in this? So, what are your interests and what was your path?
Well, first thing I have to do legally is to give a short disclaimer saying that anything that I talk about, it comes from me. It's my ideas. It's not from the National Security Agency, the Central Security Service, or the FBI.
Sounds good.
Where did I come from and how did this work? There are standardized schools for electronic warfare training, and usually people that come out of high school with maybe a background in electrical engineering or starting to go into electrical engineering will go into this discipline. However, most of the people that come into this in the military, in the Army, in the U.S. Army, basically are put into it from somewhere else. I came into the Army as an infantry guy. I was a paratrooper. And I figured that's what I was going to do my whole life. And then the Army came up to me one day and said, hey, you know what? You seem to be the kind of guy that we want to put in the medical corps. And right, the logic of the Army.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I was involved in, I was on an ambulance corps. I was involved in emergency medicine before I joined the Army. I know how to do things. I can run an IV. I can give injections. Sure, all kinds of. I can suture somebody. Sure, no problem. So they sent me to school, and I came out the back end as an officer. I went in and enlisted, came out as an officer in the Medical Service Corps, and it was assigned to a forward surgical team. And a forward surgical team is a team of 20 people. The medical service officer is pretty much the person that runs the team, administration, management, logistics, operations, all those things. You have a surgeon assigned, and you have a couple of OR techs, and everybody else supports them. The forward surgical team goes up into the combat area, and you conduct surgery while combat's going on. That's the
Okay.
concept behind it. So I did that for a very, very short time and ended up getting transferred down to Washington, D.C. I was in New York City. And I got transferred to Washington, D.C., where I was assigned to the Army Materiel Command. Out of all things, I had been in, I was in the medical branch, and then they sent me back over to logistics, where I had never worked in my life. I did a couple of years there as the executive officer for the Intelligence and Security Office, which was pretty new for me. I had
Hmm.
operated as a command security manager in New York City for the Army division located there, but I hadn't been really deep inside of intelligence and security. I provided intelligence support to the Army units during 9/11
Okay.
in New York City, and had worked at Ground Zero. And, I was working the force protection aspect of providing intelligence to the people that were protecting American citizens on the ground and military forces on the ground from potential terrorist attacks. And that was about as deep as I had gotten into it. So when I ended up at the Army Materiel Command, okay, I have no idea what's going on here. Um, Fast forward a short bit of time, and I ended up at the Joint Task Force for Global Network Operations. And that is the big computer defense organization that provides computer defense operations to the U.S. military. They have a support agency, the Defense Information Systems Agency, that provides service and support for the JTF. And they work together in the same building. They're co-located.
Mm.
So operations, service support, they're together. They work together. It works out pretty well. So I worked there for a while. All this while, I had been supporting some research work that was happening at Fort Detrick, working on Eastern equine encephalitis from my medical background. And I was doing
Mm.
that at the same time I was at the Army Materiel Command. I had 2 days that I would go up there and work. So during that time, I was creating uh, computer, I have to call them tools. I have computer tools that are developed that match the influenza A series of viruses. So H1N1, H1N2. And I created these tools
Hmm.
that behave the same way as the viruses did. When we took the information from computer networks and correlated that to real world environments, we could have the virus that I created behave in the same manner on the network as the virus itself would behave in a human's body.
So it's kind of like almost like creating a game out of it. I don't want to say game. I don't know, but like a scenario, right? You're running a scenario.
Sure,
Okay.
that's correct. So we had all kinds of input from human bodies, and we correlated that to behaviors and activities and functions inside of computer networks. And each of these tools would work a specific way
Mm-hmm.
in that specific environment. Some wouldn't function at all, others would function very well. So you were able to have a boutique setup. So you could select what type of tools you wanted for what environments. You could have some that got dropped off and wouldn't function in that environment at all. And you could have something come along, pick them up, and take them over to the next environment where they worked and the other tool didn't work. So you could transcend between Microsoft to Linux to Mac, back and forth, pick an operating system. And some of them functioned on the various different layers. So they would do different things in different layers.
Okay.
So I did a briefing to a bunch of people that I had no idea who anybody was. And the next thing I know, for the needs of the Army, I'm transferred out of the medical corps where the Army had just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to send me to school,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm transferred into intelligence. And now I get sent off to the National Security Agency, where I spent the next 4 plus years or so. I don't remember exactly how long. It's
Yeah.
been a while. But I spent quite a while there working as a member of the Central Security Service, which are the military detailees to the National Security Agency. And I worked there and I provided support like this. How did I get from cyber to electronic warfare? Well, that was the final step in this confusing activity that I call my career. Basically, I was taken my first week. I was brought in and I was given this standard training on information warfare, information operations, how to do this, that, all kinds of things. And one of the key pillars of information warfare is electronic uh, warfare,
Hmm.
operation security, psychological operations, deception, things like that. But electronic warfare is one of the key components. So I got into that and I somehow accelerated to the top of the class in electronic warfare. And one of the instructors there was like, "Hey, you know what? We're going to send you to some more schools because you seem to grasp this really well." And I got dumped into electronic warfare. So I was able to understand what types of attacks you could have on everything from a satellite to a ground station to a hardened network using RF
Okay.
and any type of manipulative electrical attacks.
See, I always wondered too, like, I guess the military must do some kind of recruiting out of schools and colleges and stuff. I always thought if you're involved in kind of this realm of things, that you're coming out of like MIT or some crazy program where you're getting the top of the top GPAs. Um, I didn't know that they could kind of build people up from the inside, right? Like it's kind of a different path than what I think most people would expect. So,
Sure, most kids coming out of school will take what's called the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or the ASVAB in the US. There are 10 scored areas, and one of those is general mechanical. There's a general technical, there's electrical, and your combination of scores in the different areas will allow the Army to offer you different jobs based on
uh,
your scoring.
okay.
So if you are strong in electrical, right, problem solving, those types of areas, mathematics, you get offered jobs in electronic warfare.
Hmm.
And I had taken the ASVAB when I joined, and I had initially I had extremely high scores, and I chose the infantry anyways. So I think the Army was thinking that I'm trying to slack and get over on them just by going out and shooting people and things and stuff like that.
There's something to be said though for doing the groundwork, right? And then you have an appreciation for the front line of it in that sense, right? So yeah, no, I think it's good that your path kind of took you in a different direction than maybe some others might just do that direct entry and then not know what other people are doing. So yeah, it's good. You get exposure to all the different functions.
It was actually very strange because when I got sent to Iraq, I was working in a I can't explain my role
Hmm.
well, other than I had to use my infantry skill set, my medical skill set, and my electronic warfare and cyber skill set to do what I needed to do for every operation I went out on.
Hmm.
That's about as clear as I can make it right now, but it was something that I wasn't expecting. I would have expected that if I go to theater, I'm going to work with the group that does the information warfare,
Yeah.
coordinated cyber, electronic warfare attacks, different things like that, deception. And it didn't happen. And I thought, well, maybe if I go out, I'm going to go with the infantry guys because I have a long career in the infantry. I know I can shoot a rifle left handed, right handed, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
No, I didn't do that exactly. I said, well, I'm assigned to the medical unit. I can go out and I can set up a forward, area. I can work in the hospital that's out there, the 48th Combat Support Hospital. I do that. No, I didn't do that. It turned out to be a combination of all that stuff inside of combat missions. And it was a very, very strange hybrid approach in my mind to
Hmm.
what you would expect somebody to do.
Well, somebody else had plans for you, so I guess it worked out. I see you kinda see that kind of in policing too. You know, you think your trajectory is gonna be in one certain path, certain functions, or a job type, and then someone comes along and goes, "You know what? I think you'd be good over here. We're putting you in there." Because end of the day, at least in policing, military, you're kinda just a number, so they're gonna put you where they need you.
Sure. I that seemed to be the way my whole career went. Every time I thought I was in a career path to do one thing or another, I was turned or I was on, uh, not the fast track, but I was on a faster track to make sergeant major
Oh, yeah?
and retire, with 20 years and go fishing and relax, like a lot of my buddies did. And then the next thing I know, I'm doing something else, and then I'm doing something else, and something else. I mean, I was assigned on temporary assignment with the FBI for a number of years at the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, which
Mhm.
is a mouthful and a half again. And we investigated crimes into government contractors, national security issues with government contracting offices, and how countries like China and Russia were attacking and stealing intellectual property, and we set up traps for them, and we did all kinds of stuff. And I never would have seen myself doing that coming out of a medical background or
Yeah.
infantry background, but yet there I was doing police work for 2.5, 3 years.
Well, I'm appreciative of it because the end of it all, it brings you to us today. So it sounds like you've had quite a fulfilling career and you've been a lot of places and done a lot of things. So, I mean, that's some great experience in there. Um, I do want to get on to the topic we are talking about today, though, which is the misinformation, disinformation. And you were kind enough, you sent a link ahead of time where you on a radio show and you were talking about this stuff. So I'll also make sure I put that up in the episode description so people can listen to that as well. But for listeners here, when we get onto the topic of truth, and maybe we'll kind of distill a little bit into misinformation, disinformation. Um, can you kind of explain those two things for listeners, what the difference is? And then we'll kind of get into more of a conversation on just where do we actually go to find out anything that's real?
That's a great question, because what is truth? That, and that's a question that we've faced as a society, or we face as different societies since antiquity.
Hmm.
We think we know what truth is, and we try to define in different terms what we believe our reality is. And I take the case of the ancient Greeks, and I look at how they look at the universe and how they looked at the earth in comparison to the planets. And their understanding was that the earth was the center of the universe. Copernicus comes along, and then we have a different theory. We have the heliocentric versus geocentric. Now there's a fight going on. Which is going to win? Which is going to be the prevalent belief? Well, needless to say, neither of them were right. But if you believed one over the other for hundreds of years, you were either spreading what we call misinformation, or you were providing disinformation,
Mm,
and I'll explain them in a minute, or you were telling the truth. Well, we'll always have this option because truth is something that is time sensitive. We can believe something is a truth only in relationship to the time that it exists.
okay.
So let's talk about misinformation for a minute. If you make a mistake, if you say something out of line, something that's not exactly true. For example, I have a plant here in my office. It's a money tree. There's no money on it, but one can only hope. And it's green. It's To me, it's green.
Hmm.
The frequency, the wavelength that comes and protrudes off of those leaves and matches with the optic nerve in my eye perceives green. To me, that's a truth.
Yeah.
Your belief, your understanding of what that color might be something completely different. So we have commonalities of understandings. We can identify a grandfather clock and say that's a grandfather clock based on what we understand something to be. We can identify an igneous rock in the same manner because it's been defined. So misinformation is just a misstatement of a perceived truth. The plant is purple. The grandfather clock is a rock.
Well, it makes me think there was like that meme going around long ago where it was like a picture of a dress, and it was like some people thought it was blue and some thought it was like gold, like it was totally different colors. But again, it was,
That's right. The pixelation, right?
yeah, based on, I guess, how your eyes are set up, your nerves. You see it one way or you see it the other.
Correct. Correct. I did a talk in Paris a couple of years ago. It was Descartes. Anyway, it was about Descartes and his perceived truths,
Hmm.
and I it was about the second meditation that Descartes had. And basically, I showed a series of what you would consider optical illusions. Is the triangle spinning this way, or is the triangle spinning this way?
Hmm.
Your perspective of where you see that triangle plays a lot into it. Your understanding of the physics itself, what you think physics are, plays a lot into which way the triangle spins. Triangle can spin either one way or the other. It it really is a 50-50 call.
Hmm.
But are you left brained? Are you right brained? How does your optic nerve receive these waveforms? All of those things played into it. And if you thought hard enough, you would see some people that have a balanced functionality in both sides of their brain can actually see and make the triangle spin both ways.
Oh, really? Okay.
A very small percentage of people can see the triangle itself and have it spin both ways at the same time.
So there's essentially a third truth.
That's correct. So, is there the truth to how the triangle spins? Well, the triangle could spin many different ways considering what your perspective is and what your personal capacity to understand reality is.
Okay.
So, misinformation is just a slight misunderstanding or misrepresentation. My glass is half full.
Hmm.
Maybe, might be three quarters of the way full, right? It's not an intentional deception,
Okay. I was going to ask, what does intent play a part in this? Like, is misinformation just,
right? And that's where disinformation comes into play. Disinformation is deliberate.
hmm,
Disinformation is the sister of propaganda, and it is the sister of deception.
okay.
Deception. If you want to see good deception, look at any advertising company and how they operate. And an advertisement you'll watch on the television or you'll hear on the radio, and it'll play to very specific audiences in a very specific manner. That would be a deception. If it goes to a broad audience in a very generalized manner, that's a psychological operation.
Wow.
So deceptions are very pointed, very specific, very unique to one center of gravity, to a person. That person is a decision maker who has the ability to dedicate resources to one thing or another. Psychological operation in a deception, which is a disinformation campaign, is generally to sway a population at once or to change the overall mood of the population from one thing to another, always to the advantage of the person who's created the psychological operation or the deception or the disinformation campaign itself.
Yeah.
When you create a disinformation campaign, there are many things to consider. You have to consider the conduit to the decision maker. How are you going to get specific information that is manipulated to a decision maker in the context that it needs to be delivered without having it changed or reinterpreted along the way, and then have that person receive it in a way that you'll understand that they know what you're talking about, and then they'll take the action you want them to take.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated thing to do disinformation.
I was gonna say, like, I understand what you're saying, but it's like I'm just trying to think of all the steps that would have to go into a plan such as that to make sure you're because humans can't even play the telephone game, right? We can't even go one person without screwing up the message. So how do you
Right.
get it? You want to influence politics at a federal level. Like how many layers do you have to go through with a consistent message? So it's, you know, maybe I'll ask on that too. So since we kind of got the definitions there, how do you combat something such as disinformation? And I'll ask that kind of in the context, like when I think of misinformation, I think that could kind of be easily rectified through education. We either tell people something, we show them the how or the why something is the way it is. But for disinformation, where it's sounds like it's I guess it's kind of always used for more of a nefarious purpose. I don't know if it's ever used for a good purpose, but how do you combat something such as disinformation, especially once it's infected somewhere?
Yeah, that's tough. So on misinformation, I would say that you don't want to combat it. You want
Mm,
to identify it because misinformation is the thing that makes us better people. Think of Copernicus, Galileo, and then Carl Sagan and everybody who redefined who we are in science and where our place is on the earth and where we are in the universe, the galaxy, the universe, and everything. You're sitting in the same spot and you have the perception that you sat there for an hour and you haven't moved.
mhm.
Well, in reality, you are over 460,000 miles from where you were 1 hour ago.
Yeah.
But your perception of where you are and who you are and where you've been hasn't changed. So, misinformation, the mistake, the oops, is not something that I think we want to get rid of in society. I believe that we want to address it. It's like, oh, there's 17. No, 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 there's really 19. Check it out. Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, 19.
Well, it helps make us inquisitive, I guess.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was exactly what I was getting to. You're spot on.
Sorry for stealing the thunder.
No, it's okay. Yeah, that's great. It makes us engage in a conversation. And that's the key to a society progressing and moving forward, being adults in the room. Disinformation is, well, when my daughter was 3, she would say, "That's bad, daddy." And different things, the dog was barking, he shouldn't bark. "That's bad, daddy." And disinformation is the bad thing because that's a deliberate manipulation. How do you combat deliberate manipulations? I think the way to start that conversation is to address it through education, as you mentioned,
Okay.
but we have to take a holistic approach to education where we are not indoctrinating or manipulating kids in first grade, second grade, third grade. We're giving honest, objective interaction with kids. And 2 reasons. Education wise, they won't be biased. And in when they have discussions and they have to make decisions later in life. And number 2, it teaches them how to be a good person who doesn't want to manipulate other people.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, right now, specifically in the States, I can see it all over the place. We're teaching and we're growing children into positions where they want to manipulate people. They want to do uh, things that are damaging to society. It's an extremely interesting situation here. This is the first time in history where, at least in the States, it is. I've seen other countries, but they don't follow the same route where when you're younger, you're very, very optimistic. And then you have a lull in the middle where you start to settle into life and you're not as happy about things and you start to see the problems and the shine comes off of everything. Reality hits.
Yeah.
And then near the end of their life, it goes back up again, optimistic, as wisdom sets in from what you gain through knowledge and you apply it in wisdom. People are more optimistic about things and understanding, have a better understanding. So that little group in the middle that goes down like that, that's your late teens through 20s into early 30s, the most manipulative group, the group that can be affected the most, which is why politicians will go to universities and things like that and find that crowd to go do their work,
Hmm.
because the manipulative people are attacking a very vulnerable group of people. But now what's happening in the States is after birth, in that short area of happiness and joy goes up to about 6 years old. And then it dives like into despair. And it doesn't show where people are optimistic coming out of the back end of that group. So the group of late teens into early 30s in the States right now are down like this.
And then they stay down.
They've been staying down there for, yeah, for a long time right now.
I kind of would equate that to when you see people at like these protests. Like you see it in the Middle East where they just might have like they're out at these big protests and they're handing kids guns and different things. And you're like, that's probably not good. Where you're starting to see that in the West, though, where they're bringing them out to these very politically charged events, and
Sure.
it could be about anything. It's religion, it's politics, it's all the things, and they're like, boy, that's gonna have a real impact on kids. And are they coming out now with a huge bias to one view or another? Are you teaching them critical thinking, or are you just telling them this is the only way to think?
That's a good point. So it's by design, right, to disrupt a society and to kind of knock the stability out from the bottom of it, because when people are fighting against each other, they're not fighting against a real target. It's a misdirection.
Yeah.
People you want to be, it's interesting in the States here, we complain more than any other culture on the face of the earth about our politicians. Yet we have the highest reelection rate of politicians in the world.
Hmm.
We'll complain about people, but we'll give them, we'll put them right back into where they came from. Gosh, that's almost like Stockholm syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You're being held hostage, but you love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
My goodness. But you said something interesting about, when you see people on the street at significant events and they're being interviewed for different things that happen, always be cautious about those people and what they're saying. I will send you the link. You can add this later on. I think I'm
Hmm.
probably one of the few people that had seen this when it first happened, but back during, and I'm not a conspiracy guy at all, don't get me wrong, but back during 9/11, when I was in New York City, I was at ground zero. I saw what happened. I saw the mess. Okay. I lived through it. My family lived through it. But there was an interview, a guy named Matt Walsh, and he was a contributor for Fox News. There was a Fox uh, um, investigative reporter on the scene, walking back and forth. The towers had just fallen not that long ago. And Matt Walsh just shows up out of nowhere. And it's like, oh, well, what's he doing there?
Hmm.
And they say, hey, he happens to be a Fox News contributor and he's here. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And he talks about very eloquently too, because, he had been on TV quite a bit. He talked very eloquently about how he saw the plane hit the first building and the second building, and then they came down. And I wrote this down because I keep this handy all the time. And he said to them, I saw the plane turn right into the side of the towers, exploding through the towers. And then he said that I saw the first tower collapse and then the second, quote, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was too intense, unquote. Now, the planes had just hit the building a few hours earlier. That type of a statement wasn't even the consideration of your on the street person, your everyday person in the world.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that the fire was too intense. Nobody knew that it was structural failure. Nobody had a clue. And in the video, you'll see a gentleman standing behind him, very carefully watching every word he says.
Hmm.
I would venture to say that guy was his handler.
Okay.
My off the cuff guess, having worked in the dark world of deception and spy craft and things like that, um, I wouldn't even be here on your show today if I wasn't outed by Edward Snowden.
Hmm.
So I have a little bit of experience in identifying deceptions and manipulations
Yeah.
like that. And that is planting information. We call that an initial plant because it happened within a couple hours. It was the first news broadcast where you had somebody who was an eyewitness that was that eloquent about restating something.
And it's, yeah,
So always be cautious about the people that are interviewed on the street. They may not just be on the street.
the initial seed that just kind of plant, and now people hear that and they just start repeating it to their friends or coworkers, and it's out there, right? Online.
Exactly. How many people have repeated that phrase almost exactly like that time and time again? And then just shortly after that, he coined the term ground zero.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and now you think with social media, as soon as you share a video, you take that clip, oh, that's just exploding. Now millions, tens of millions of people are seeing that. I see this, in my experience in the policing world, I'll see these kind of things. I'll go to an event, I'll be at some critical incident, and I'll see what's going on. I'll know things behind the scenes, some of the decisions being made or why. So you know the ins and outs. And then I'll watch the news. And I saw actually a good example I've talked about on this podcast before was with the trucker convoy that went to Ottawa and occupied the whole downtown area. So I
Right.
was there, deployed as one of the officers, and right at ground level, they basically were just telling everybody on the news, you'd always see like it's white supremacists, and they would only ever show a lot of the news. It would be the Canadian flag, people walking around with the Canadian flags, and they got the swastikas put on them and stuff. But when I'm there at ground zero for that and looking at what's in front of me and all the interactions I had, I was like, this is a very multicultural crowd. If you think about who a lot of the truck drivers are, there's a lot of East Indian people, there's a lot of Middle Eastern people.
Right.
It was not what was on the news. And then right from the first night, we were down there. We were moving some crowd in a intersection. So this is where I had a lot of interactions. I go back and see the news that night or early morning by the time we kind of got in to the hotel. And it was saying the complete opposite of what I was seeing right there on the ground. And that is what kind of got me started on thinking like, well, what the hell is everybody actually talking about? And what are we actually being fed? Right? Like what stories are we getting told? And it's not even conspiracy theory. It's like I saw this with my own eyes, right?
Right.
I can't make up people in front of me. So yeah.
Well, think about what you're not being told, Nathan.
Hmm.
Now, what companies have more advertisements on paid television than anybody else? I would venture to say the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And are you going to buy, you're going to walk down the street and buy X ointment because it does whatever you need it to do? No, you need a prescription for it. Well, go tell your doctor to get this. How many people actually do that? How many people go in and demand this medication that they have no idea or no understanding of how that medication works
Hmm.
and the intricate physiological interactions that happen to make it work or not work in your specific case? People can't do that. I have a doctorate in public health. I do epidemiology. I assess and analyze public health and individual health data all the time. Nobody Nobody on the street has a clue on how the latest drug works for whatever it is. But what they do is they keep everybody else out of the advertising business on that news broadcast or in that news broadcast or on on that media outlet.
Yeah.
And they pay big money to sponsor. If you look at like the Today Show, all of the very, very highly rated shows, you'll see brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Moderna, brought to you, right? Their names are right up there.
Yeah.
They're sponsoring those shows. The people that are delivering messages on those shows are not going to cut off their sponsors by saying what their sponsors don't want to hear.
Hmm.
They're going to say what the sponsors want them to say.
Hmm.
And that's how the news cycle works through. That's how you are fed certain information that comes from their perspective. And it's what we call passive disinformation.
Okay.
So you're told because they don't want to lose their money and they're going to do what they want. But the passive part is that they're buying up all the advertising time. So nobody else can get their message out. So they're taking everybody else's microphone away. So you're only fed their perspective of what the situation is. It's a very powerful and useful model that's been done time and time again by dictators throughout the history of the world.
Yeah. Well, and by being on certain shows or just your commercial plays, and then it just goes like natural into whatever celebrity is doing their show. It almost creates a sense of trust, right? Because it's like, well, why would they
Mhm.
play that if these people weren't okay with it? So yeah.
Back in the First World War, the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson was up for election in 1916, and he ran on a platform where he wasn't going to get the U.S. into the war. It wasn't going to happen. We're going to stay out. We're going to stay independent, and because the U.S. really hadn't decided were they on the Allies side or were they on the German and Austro-Hungarian side.
Mm,
They didn't know what side they were going to be on because lots of American immigrants were German.
yeah.
So we had this back and forth balance. And when the Germans ran, I forget the name of the submarine, but they broke through the British blockade and they made it in and they pulled into port in Maryland somewhere. And it was a big celebration, and they were cheered and wined and dined the whole time. And they took some critical supplies and they brought it back. It wasn't, didn't make a huge difference, but symbolically, they had broken through the British blockade. They were there. They were treated very well by the Americans. They were loved. They were brought in.
Mm,
So America was like this on whose side if we do join. But Woodrow Wilson said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And after he was elected, Woodrow Wilson kind of changed his position. And he decided that we needed to get engaged and we needed to join the war. And we were going to go with the Brits because we decided that the Germans sinking the Lusitania had caught public opinion on one side that made more Americans not interested in supporting Germany than they did the Brits. The second thing was we had loaned tremendous amounts of money to the Brits, who in turn took the money and invested it in the U.S. stock market. And we're taking the profits on the money that we lent them and funding the war for themselves while they took those profits for themselves and then they gave some to the French. So they lent money to the French too
mm,
and made tons of money off the war. But Woodrow Wilson had this problem because he had to convince Americans that we needed to go to war to defend our honor and a whole list of things that he had contrived at the time. And he came up with a novel idea. He created an office of propaganda, and it was called the Creel Committee. It was run by Senator Creel. And in the Creel Committee, they came up with different ways to spread propaganda in the United States to U.S. citizens to convince them that they wanted to go to war. Not so much that it was Woodrow Wilson's idea that we go to war to defend our honor and all this other stuff. It was to create a grassroots movement so the people would swell up and say, we want to go to war. We want to do this now. And Wilson would say, well, if you want to, we're going to have to do this. So he did, and they came up with a concept called the 4 minute men. Excuse me, 4 minute men. And back in the day, one of the biggest new innovations was called a movie house. In the movie house, you had films that were put on reels, and you
Hmm.
ran them, and you'd have like 4 reels or 6 reels or 8 reels to a movie. Well, you'd run it through, and then you had to rewind it, put it back on the original reel, take it off, thread the new one, push it through, and then start it up again. Well, from the time that it ended to the time that you put the new one in, it was ready to go, was about 4 minutes.
Okay.
So Woodrow Wilson and the Krill Committee, what they did was they took sports figures, prominent new Hollywood stars, politicians, figures that were prominent that you would know, and they had them get up on stages in movie houses all around the states and say, "This is why you want to go to war. Look at what's going on here."
Hmm.
And they would explain and prophesize to different people in different groups why you wanted to go to war. And the level of uh, intensity was raised to the point where people were crying out for Woodrow Wilson to go to war.
Wow.
And there we go.
So basically, flip the script on everybody.
Exactly.
And not to just totally dog on America, but does everybody do this? Like, I imagine anyone going to war
Yeah.
for whatever purpose, the Germans, the Japanese, whoever, like they're all trying to drum up support for whatever their mission is. So,
Sure. Sure. Oh yeah. All I would say that all governments do this. Well, excuse me, people in governments do this to retain their power base. There, anybody in government who is high enough up to want to stay in power, uh, i.e., a megalomaniac, right? Somebody
mm,
who's really all about themselves, who wants to garner power to themselves, and be that anybody who desires the office that they're in should be disqualified immediately from that office, because this is exactly what you get out of it. You exactly what we're talking about here. These things that stop real progress, stop real cooperation. Did you or anybody else or anybody you know of around the world individually say, "I want to declare war on Italy"?
mm,
No, never a reason to. I spent a lot of time in China, and I walked around, and I speak a little bit of Chinese here or there, but looking at the people as I walked through and talking with them as I walked from village to village with my family. We were there for a wedding, and we stayed for 4 weeks or so. The first time we went, they're regular people. They're like you and me. They want to make sure that their family has food, housing, as clean water as you can get.
hmm,
Right? The simple, the very basic Maslowian needs,
yeah,
right? Those very bedrock things. They're not looking for, spiritual awakeness or something like that that takes you to the top of the pyramid where all the people who want power are. They were just living very simple, normal lives, not caring about what the government wanted them to do or was doing to them, other than it disrupted their very simple, happy walk of life.
yeah,
So I think you're absolutely right. I think governments around the world do the same thing, and it's a it's always government. It's not really the people themselves that
yeah.
rise up or have issues.
Well, yeah, government or like the corporations that are doing all this crazy marketing, trying to sell you
It's a
the
joint
product.
it's a joint venture.
Yeah.
Corporations run governments, governments sponsor corporations. So here's a good example. Um, in the States, we have 3 or 4 companies that make tires, automobile tires.
Okay.
The design hasn't changed in 100 years. Tire is still a tire.
Yeah.
We haven't come up with a new innovation. We put people on the moon. We we've cured diseases.
But I still can't stop on ice.
Right. And I so and I only have like 4 companies
Yep.
still The barrier to entry is impossible because the regulations that were designed around tire manufacturing are insane. They're written by the lobbyists or the tire and rubber companies
Hmm.
and given to a congressperson, assembly person, or a senator to introduce as a bill. The same thing in pharmaceuticals. If you wanted to open a pharmaceutical company yourself, how long do you think it would take you to get all of the permits and clear all of the legal hurdles to open a pharmaceutical company on your own? Brand new, scratch, out of the gate. Not happening in your lifetime.
Yeah.
You better will it to your great grandkids to open that company.
You know what? That kind of leads me to where, a question of where would people go or what should they do if they want to actually know as close to the truth as possible? Because I don't think it's possible to get to 100%. But when you see something on TV, whatever it is, whatever the topic is, how does somebody go about getting as close to the real info as possible?
So that's a tough question to answer because I think the way to answer it is look at the source, the motivations of the source.
Yeah.
Who do they support? Where are they interested? Always follow the money. And this is the problem with vetting out disinformation is because it takes effort and takes time. Most people are too busy
Yes.
in their world running back and forth their 9 to 5 job and everything else. You don't have time, so you have to trust somebody else, right? That's passive perception again.
Yeah.
So realistically, follow the money. See who paid who to do what. And don't stop at one level of abstraction. I would say go back to 2 or 3 layers away because I was involved in a lot of the research on COVID. I would review for the CDC. I was reviewing all of the research papers that came in with the team that we were on. And we would see the teams, we would see the papers that came through, and we'd look at it, and they would declare no conflict, here or there. And if you rolled that back and saw that they received funding from this or that, and this, eventually you'd get back to a pharmaceutical company
Hmm.
who initially made the money, who created the money trail that eventually got to the researcher or a corporation that was sponsoring the researcher. But because of the requirements for peer review analysis and declaration of what your conflicts are, you only go back this far, and the money was coming back from this far.
Mm.
And we would point those types of things out and say, hey, that's not a good idea. You can't go that far back. That's outside the purview. So we're going to, your comments are taken off the record. So always go back, always check the money trail as far back as you can. It'll lead back to a specific source. The second thing I would say that's really important is no matter what comes out or what you see or what you hear, who has something to gain by what's been said?
Okay.
Look for the beneficiary on that insurance policy. That will tell you so much more than you're hearing in the verbal message itself or you're seeing on a billboard.
Yeah.
Who's going to benefit from that? And who is that going to hurt? And then you'll have a very good idea of where it's coming from. Understanding biases, your personal biases, what you prefer. As a kid, you have beliefs, you have values that are instilled in you before you're 8 years old. 8 years old is a magic cutoff date for being a sponge.
Yeah.
You become a bump on a log after that. But beliefs and values are embedded in you at a very young age. And most people, almost no one can deviate that from that as they get older. It takes a very, very unique person to consume new information and change their perspective on something, change their point of view,
Hmm.
to adapt to something because they're accepting new information. Most people can't do that.
Yeah.
So most people's bias will be back to what they were taught, what they learned what they trusted and were safe with as a child.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So always be aware of that. Um, I'm not saying you have to, completely knock down the walls of your life and destroy your safety and your understanding of the world, but look inside of you. Look at what you believe, what you think you want to hear, your perceived perception of a situation,
You,
what you think you see about it.
and that makes me think too, like when police have been getting a bad rap for a lot of things like use of force
Yeah,
over the last few years. And then they always go talk to the experts. But the experts are people who you would, when you see them, you're like, I don't know if that person's even seen the light of day in their whole life. Like you're like, you're not
right.
you're a use of force expert, but you're also an expert in like 30 other things that police do. And that makes me think, okay, well, fine, they can say whatever they want, but who are they benefiting? What is their motivation? Why is somebody even talking to this person in the first place? And I think the big, it's something that anytime I do social media posts, I always try to encourage people like, hey, here's maybe my opinion or just something I see based on experience. But again, ask questions. You don't have to take my word for it. I'm one little piece that's just telling you something. But I strongly encourage people get educated, ask questions, seek out your own truth because I find, and like you were saying earlier, people don't have time in a lot of respects, and I can understand that. But if you're gonna give an opinion or you're gonna speak out on something, I think people need to start looking a little deeper. And that's also part of the reason why doing shows like this podcast, and you start to see people are getting back into that space where they want that long form discussion because the short little headlines, the two sentences that people can flip out on Twitter, I think people are getting sick of the whole screaming and shouting that's caused, and they're asking the why. And especially in this
Yeah.
generation, with the position I do now, I was just promoted to sergeant, and this was part of our new sergeant's course where they're saying, maybe back, even just 10 years ago, when you came in, you were kind of just told like, do this. And if you asked any questions, it was like, shut up and just do it. That's the way it's always been done. Or because I told you this is my rank, you're the lower rank. So do what I say.
Right,
But now,
right. The hierarchical mentality.
yeah,
Right.
but now you can't do that because, well, people won't work for you or they'll start to turn against you, right? People are starting to ask the why. So they want more depth to that conversation. And I find whenever I have a discussion with anyone about anything, if I can come in with just a level of two of depth, uh, it's almost you can almost see it's like blowing their mind. And sometimes they go like, it's almost like it's hard to process for them. And I think that's just because, and it's not like I'm giving some super revelations to people. It's just I don't think they're used to that. And for so long, we're just told like, you're given the headline, the clickbait,
Mhm.
and this is the truth. And they've accepted that. And now we're trying to move people back to that critical thinking. Hey, you have a whole lifetime of experiences. Like you're not a novice in this thing called life. There might be certain topics that you're not an expert on or the authority on, but it doesn't mean you can't ask questions and get educated to a level where you're not far from a lot of the politicians out there, right? The politicians are kind of generalists in a lot of things, and they're told a lot of things by people below them. So you can be very close in the knowledge base that you need to be to make some of these critical decisions, to have a valid opinion on something, but also again with always being open. I know you're saying that like by 8 most people kind of formed their morals and their values and stuff, but
Yeah, they're locked in. Yeah.
I would say just on that, I think like at least for myself, I've found in the last couple years especially since doing this podcast stuff and talking to people who are uber successful in their life, people that are authorities on topics such as yourself. Uh, it has greatly changed my perspective on a lot of things. And where I might have used to been very quick in making a decision or just snapping to judgment or an opinion, like I've pulled back on a lot of that. And now I actually go out and seek out information, and I'll read multiple sources on something. I'll ask questions of people that I trust, respect, um, to kind of give me some perspective on things. So yeah, it's like it's a huge battle that's like never ending with this misinformation, disinfo.
So this is the definition of true wisdom,
Mm,
is to be able to ingest ideas that are not yours, that are someone else's information that you haven't considered before, and applying it in a critical problem solving type of a manner to make yourself more informed. Absolutely. Carl Jung was very specific when he said that most people cannot think logically, therefore they think emotionally.
yes.
And by removing conversations from people, like introducing things like this, that people put in front of their face 90% of the day, you're taking away that conversation, that exchange of information. The long form is gone. You're absolutely right. But you're being directed down a path in a passive deception again,
Yeah.
because you don't have to have a phone that you have in this manner. You don't have to have all of the applications, the games, the things that distract you, the things that are designed to hold your attention, to hold your interest. You've heard of doom scrolling, right? People lay
Yeah.
there at night, they're sleeping, they're like, I gotta see more. I gotta see. Your brain has been chemically altered to desire that. I've seen study after study that explain how the neurotransmitters, the hormones, and the enzymes in your body react to you doom scrolling on a blue screen. It is tremendous. Computers have blue screen. Again, it's the same thing. It throws off the balance of hormones in your body, and you crave more.
Mm,
So you're not engaging with people. You've lost that communicative interaction that used to happen all the time. Well, except maybe in New York City, people, we would walk through this. I'm from Brooklyn, right? We would walk through the streets and go, "Yo, hey, how you doing?" Yeah. And that was the end of the discussion until you got to somebody's house, and then it became very exciting. but but people have lost that type of an interaction in small groups. I see it all the time. Half the people are sitting on the side, or they're standing there going, "Uh huh, uh huh, yeah, mm-hmm." They're not paying any attention to someone, you know. And so you have emotional isolation, right? And all other types of very negative things emotionally, psychologically happening to people now, where they think nobody's listening to them. So that creates a scenario where people want to get heard, because it's an innate desire
mhm.
to not be lost, not be isolated. That person who's lost in the world and is lost to the world. People are social.
Yeah.
So that creates people who want to go back out and have their voice heard. So if you're competing with everyone else on social media to be heard, right? Because hey, boom, you got serotonin. I got 3 likes. I got 5 likes. That's a hit in your brain, and it feeds you. So if you're craving attention and you're not getting attention, you're going to go to a place and create the scenario where you get attention, because you
Yeah.
need that basic human function. So you're going to have outlandish things said. You're going to have crazy things. So just so people can start the conversation, or have people look at them and say, "Oh my gosh, did you see what that guy said?
Mhm.
That's crazy." True? Probably not. But it was enough to get people to pay attention to you. That's what most people really want, that are going out and putting information out like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind of the insights and stuff into all the misinformation, disinformation, where people could kind of seek out truth and I guess ask better questions, be better people. um, just as we are coming up to the end of our time here, I just wanted to find out from you kind of what's next on the horizon for you. Any big projects coming up? more conferences. That's how we kind of met at the Vancouver International Security Summit, which is a wicked conference, by the way. And hope we can connect at the next one as well. But what's on the horizon for you?
I will be in Los Angeles at Planet Cyber in the next couple of weeks. I'm also working on a project where I'm taking and creating a quantum environment, basically for people to experience and interact in the quantum environment. I'm working with a couple of several other organizations on building that right now. Pretty cool from
Yeah.
the people that are involved. They have interesting insight in how to collect and give feedback, and it's quite an amazing project so far. I can't say too much about it because I'm under disclaimer to not get into it too much, but it's pretty cool. Spending a lot of time working on that. I'm also going to be I'll be in up in Victoria for the Vancouver the VIPSS, which is
Okay.
Vancouver International Privacy and Security Summit.
Yeah.
That'll be in March, uh, and I've got 5 or 6 other things that are going to be happening after that that I don't can't remember off the top of my head, but
Nothing you ever do sounds small in scale.
yeah,
Oh,
not so much. No, not so much. I like to be involved with interesting and exciting things and talk to really interesting people, which is kind of how we met, and I appreciate that. But I, I I'm not one for a dull conversation. I may not be the most eloquent speaker in the world, but I am able to listen and learn from other people.
hey, you know what? You're getting important information out, and I think that's what's critical, especially nowadays. You're doing a good service. So, um, I want to say, ask you too, just where can people find you and your work? So, any websites, social media that they should find you on?
Sure, you can find me at LinkedIn, Gregory Carpenter. Um, I think I'm listed as CSO KBI under my profile. You'll see me, Gregory Carpenter, Doctor of Public Health. Twitter at GSCarp12, GSCARP12. Although I don't use Twitter, as we were discussing, short form is I use it to find tidbits of information here and there, basically.
Hmm.
That's about it, though. I don't really
Okay.
have too much of a profile anywhere else. You can find me on the Amazon author page, where they have
Yeah.
my profile up for a book I co-wrote, Reverse Deception, basically how to manipulate hackers into exposing themselves in your network.
Well, and you know what? On that other one that I'll put the link up to, the other interview that you did, and you were talking about that book. And just real quick, it was funny because you mentioned how it was taken, I guess, by China. They translated it, and you didn't get a single dollar out of it. I was like, yeah, I don't think they have a complaints department for you, so you're out of
No,
luck.
not it was a guy named a notorious international hacker named Archer and his compadre in crime, Sword Leah, Lea, Sword Leah. Um, and they had contacted us to ask about uh, our interpretation of different colloquialisms and terms that were used in the book where they didn't understand. And I said, "My goodness, you don't understand? That's Sun Tzu. Uh, you should probably know who that guy is." And,
Yeah.
a couple others, but which were uh, mostly French and American colloquialisms. So basically, they didn't have an idea on how to translate it. And as we were going through this, they would contact us periodically, and we know who they were. You know what I mean? It wasn't like we didn't know who they were, and we just kept saying, "It's like, hey, going to get us for it." Oh, well, we're working through it. We're working through it. But it was
Right.
number 1 on Amazon in China for 11 weeks. Yeah, under the text.
Wow. Hey,
Oh,
man. Well, you're a celebrity somewhere.
sure, I guess so.
So that just kind of brings us to the end of the time. I want to say thank you for being on the show, Greg. Hang on the line for 2 seconds. We'll chat offline, but I really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.